After Don Rickles passed away in 2017, his home in Beverly Hills remained untouched for nearly 2 years. Nestled near the top of a quiet cul-de-sac off Coldwater Canyon, the property was a quintessential mid-century time capsule. Its low-slung rooflines, terrazzo floors, and warm wood-paneled walls still carried the aura of old Hollywood. Laughter, roast dinners, and cutting one-liners used to echo through the house like clockwork. But by 2020, the estate was quietly listed for sale. It was Jeremy and Talia Rosen, a married couple in their late 30s, who bought the home in 2021. Both worked remotely, Jeremy in marketing for a tech firm, Talia as a visual artist. They had no kids, just a golden retriever named Boomer and a love for vintage architecture. Talia in particular had fallen in love with the living room's sunken conversation pit, which still had its original upholstery. The couple moved in late September, just before the heat started to lift. At first, the house felt charming, alive even. Talia claimed she could feel the energy of its past, and Jeremy joked that maybe Don's ghost would heckle them during dinner. Then came the noises. It began with the ceiling vents rattling in the middle of the night. The couple assumed it was the old HVAC system kicking in. But when the vents continued to rattle even when the system was off, Jeremy called an inspector. The man checked every duct and crawl space, emerging puzzled. "Nothing's wrong, but I'll admit this place has a weird stillness to it." The second incident came 2 weeks later. Talia was working in the studio they'd set up in the converted garage. She was painting when she heard laughter, faint, raspy, distinctly male, coming from the house. Thinking Jeremy had come home early from his co-working space, she went inside. The house was empty. No windows were open, no TV on. She didn't tell Jeremy. That weekend, they hosted their first dinner party. 5 friends came over. As Jeremy gave a casual tour of the home, one of the guests, a stand-up comic named Rico, stopped in the hallway and stared into Don Rickles' former study. "This room gives me the chills," Rico muttered. "It's like someone's watching me and getting ready to roast me." Everyone laughed it off until the lights dimmed slightly. The dimmer switch hadn't been touched. Talia began to notice subtle changes in her artwork. One of her abstract paintings kept drying with strange facial outlines, always the same smug grin, heavy brows, and what looked like a hand pointing directly at her. She painted over it 3 times, and each time, the face re-emerged. Jeremy finally joked, "Maybe Don doesn't like abstract art." By November, things had escalated. The TV would switch to old comedy roasts on its own. Don's voice would echo out of the soundbar, even though no streaming apps were open. The couple changed remotes, reset the router. Nothing helped. One night, Jeremy found Boomer growling at the hallway mirror. When he stepped closer, he swore just for a second. He saw his own reflection replaced with an older man in a tuxedo, smirking and shaking his head. "You're not funny, kid," he thought he heard. Then it was gone. That night, Talia confessed she'd been seeing glimpses too. Always in the corner of her eye, someone pacing, sitting in Don's old study, standing near the fireplace. Once, she thought she heard whispering directly behind her. "You call that art? My toupee had more expression." In December, they called in a spiritual medium. The woman walked silently through the house for an hour, ending in the kitchen, where she placed a small photograph of Don Rickles on the counter and lit a candle. "This man never left," she said quietly. "But he's not here to hurt you. He doesn't understand he's gone. He's still performing." "Performing?" Jeremy asked. The woman nodded. "Every night, every laugh, every roast. He doesn't know how to stop." Talia started sleeping in the guest room. Jeremy tried to engage with the spirit, leaving out an old comedy LP and playing it on their turntable, even writing a joke and leaving it on the kitchen counter. The next morning, the paper was gone, but a new note was there, for words in shaky handwriting. "Not your best work." To this day, the Rosens still live in the house. They've learned to live with the spirit like an invisible roommate stuck in a Vegas lounge set. Talia swears she can still hear muffled laughter in the walls. Jeremy leaves one light on in the study every night, just in case. And every once in a while, when a guest says something awkward at dinner, A cold draft will sweep through the room, followed by the faintest whisper. Tough crowd. By mid-January, the Santa Ana winds had begun to pick up again, rattling the old avocado trees in the backyard and pushing dry leaves into the swimming pool like careless whispers of the past. The Rosen house, though warm and neatly kept inside, had begun to feel like a stage set bright on the surface, but hollow behind the curtains. The nights were the worst. It was always between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. when the air changed. Boomer would stir first, his ears twitching, head lifting from the foot of Talia's bed, now her permanent bedroom, separated from Jeremy by both tension and fear. Then came the creak of a floorboard in the hallway, that same board outside the door to Don's old study, which they never fully shut anymore. Not after the scratching. The scratching had started slow like a soft tapping from inside the walls. First behind the desk, then from inside the closet. Jeremy had opened the walls twice, hired 2 different contractors. Nothing. No animals. No wiring. Just silence while someone watched from the shadows. The worst incident happened the night Talia had a nightmare of a smoke-filled room. In the dream, she stood on stage at some dark club she'd never been to, red velvet curtains behind her, a single spotlight in her eyes. Laughter boomed from the darkness, not joyful, but mocking. She couldn't see the audience, but she heard the jokes being lobbed at her old-school zingers, each one sharper than the last. Where'd you learn to paint kindergarten? I've seen better posture from corpses. You're so tense, even your shadow looks uncomfortable. She woke in a cold sweat. Across the hallway, Jeremy was already up, standing in the middle of the den, barefoot in a t-shirt and boxers, staring at the television. The screen wasn't on, just a black reflection of his face in the glass. But he was laughing softly, almost uncertainly, as if someone had said something and he wasn't sure if he was in on the joke. Jeremy, Talia whispered, stepping toward him. What are you doing? He turned to her slowly, still half laughing, then stopped. I don't know, he muttered. I thought I heard him again. The study had become a no-go zone. Neither of them admitted it aloud, but both avoided it during the day and locked the door at night. Still, the smell of old cigars would creep under the gap in the threshold. Musky, bitter, unmistakably aged. There hadn't been a single cigar in the house since they moved in. Then there was the photograph. One afternoon in February, Talia returned from the market and found Jeremy sitting at the dining room table, staring down at a framed picture she didn't recognize. A candid black and white shot of Don Rickles in a tuxedo standing just outside what looked like the exact same house. Only decades earlier. The grin was unmistakable. So was the backdrop. The same stone facade. The same crooked juniper to the right of the front porch. Where'd you get this? She asked, setting down the groceries. Jeremy didn't answer right away. I found it inside the HVAC return vent, he finally said. I was checking it again for that rattling. I unscrewed the grate and it was just sitting there, face down, in the dust. They examined the back of the photo. No writing, no date, just an old paper smell and the slight curl of time. That night, they placed the photo on the mantel out of respect. The house was quiet for 2 days. Then came the night of the fire. Talia had been asleep when she smelled it, faint smoke, like burning paper and aged varnish. The fire alarm didn't go off. Boomer didn't bark, but something pulled her from bed. The study door was wide open. Inside, the air shimmered as if the walls were breathing heat. The photo they'd placed on the mantel now sat on Don's old desk, and beneath it, in thin curling lines of soot, someone had traced a stage layout onto the desk surface, a semicircle with small figures, stick-like and leaning in laughter. Suddenly, the curtains caught flame. A blue-white spark, as if from nowhere, spread up the old fabric in seconds. Jeremy rushed in with a fire extinguisher, killing the flame before it could leap to the carpet. After the smoke cleared, they found the words burned lightly into the drywall behind the curtain rod. Opening night. They moved into the guest house after that. Small, cramped, but manageable. The main house remained locked, windows covered, power off. Talia wanted to sell. Jeremy refused. He said he needed time. Time to finish the show. She didn't understand what that meant until she came back from a gallery run one evening to find him sitting alone in the main house. Lights on. Music playing softly from a speaker. The same jazz records Rickles used for walk-on tunes. He was pacing, talking to an empty chair, practicing, rehearsing. "Jeremy," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "I think he wants me to host," he said quietly. "I've been working on the act. I just need the right audience." Talia stared at him, and for a moment, just a flash, she thought she saw someone standing behind her husband in the reflection of the patio door. A small man, broad shoulders, tuxedo, smiling. The weather had changed again by early March, though you could only really tell it inside the guest house. The thick old pipes beneath the concrete slab foundation made a distinct, almost sorrowful moan each time the temperature dipped, like the house was exhaling under some ancient pressure. Talia had grown used to the sound. She no longer turned her head when she heard it. The moan had become part of her life now, like the dull ache behind her left eye when she hadn't slept, or the pressure in her chest each time she looked out at the main house and found the porch light on, though they'd unscrewed the bulb weeks ago. Jeremy had changed. Not all at once. It was slow, like a costume coming on in pieces. It started with the jokes. At first, she thought they were just an escape. Nervous quips muttered under his breath when something fell, or a sharp little comment when the mail was late. But then he began writing them down. In notebooks, on napkins, on the backs of receipts. She'd find them folded in his pockets. Little one-liners. "The mailman's got more personality than you. I've seen better delivery from a broken dishwasher. You look like you lost a bet with fashion." They weren't Jeremy's style. Not his cadence. Not his voice. One night, she watched him rehearse in front of the bathroom mirror. Shirtless, eyes glassy, arms stiff at his sides. He was mouthing the words as if someone were feeding them to him, like a ventriloquist's dummy finding its own rhythm. He laughed to himself after each line, quiet, mechanical. And he wasn't alone in the reflection. There was something else. A second presence. Not fully formed. More like a distortion, like heat waves in the air or a smudge on glass. But there it was, standing slightly behind him, a shoulder higher, as if looming. Talia stopped sleeping. On the third Saturday in March, Jeremy announced he was going back into the main house. Not just to check the wiring or bring in tools. He was going to move his workspace back into Don's study. "You can't be serious," she said. "It's quieter in there," he said. "Besides, I think he's calmed down. He's waiting. I just need to give him what he wants." "He?" she asked. But Jeremy didn't clarify. He simply gathered a few items, a tape recorder, a microphone, his notebook of jokes, and disappeared into the house, locking the door behind him. That night, the lights in the living room flickered like a spotlight. Talia tried to ignore it. She blasted music in her headphones, paced the guest house, took Boomer out on extra walks. But by the fourth night, she couldn't take it anymore. At 2:12 a.m., she crept up the stone path to the front door. The porch light was on again, fully screwed in. A faint buzzing came from inside the house. Not quite music, not quite static. Like a crowd, murmuring. The front door was unlocked. She stepped in slowly. The living room smelled different now. Less like mold and old wood. More like cologne, sharp, powdery, nostalgic. There were new things on the mantel. A glass of bourbon, half empty. A red pocket square draped over the edge like a forgotten accessory. The record player was spinning, though the vinyl had long since ended. Just the stylus looping, crackling like applause after a show. She followed the sound of Jeremy's voice into the study. He was sitting in Don Rickles' old leather chair, facing the wall. A desk lamp was on, casting his shadow high and long across the built-in bookcase. The microphone stood in front of him on a stand. His notebook was open, and he was talking into the void. "And I said, 'Lady, that's not a chihuahua. That's my Uncle Frank.'" There was silence. Then something faint. A low chuckle. Dry. Gravelly. Talia stepped closer. Jeremy turned slowly. His eyes didn't meet hers. He looked through her, like she was part of the wall. And he smiled. Not at her, but in response to something unheard. "I'm killing tonight," he said softly. "Jeremy," she said. her voice cracking. "Come home." He looked at her, and for a moment, the spell wavered. His mouth twitched. A shadow crossed his face. Then something moved behind her in the room. She felt it like pressure against her back. The light flickered. Jeremy stood. "No," he said. "He's still working on the set. We're just getting warmed up." The wall behind him shimmered for a moment, like a curtain of smoke. And on it, just for a breath, Talia swore she saw the faint outline of a stage. Red velvet. Rows of chairs stretching back into the dark. And seated in the front row, barely visible in the gloom, was a single man. Tuxedoed. Arms crossed. Watching. The next morning, Talia packed a bag. She took Boomer. She left a note. She hasn't been back since. But the neighbors say the house still lights up at night. Sometimes after midnight, you can hear faint laughter coming through the walls. Sometimes music. And on rare nights, if you're standing at the end of the driveway and the wind dies down enough, you might hear a voice that isn't Jeremy's crackling through an old microphone. Tight. Precise. Cold as marble. Don't go anywhere. Folks, we're just getting started. April brought a gentle bloom to the hills of Beverly Hills. Purple jacaranda trees drooped like weary ghosts along the boulevard, their blossoms falling silently onto windshield glass and stone pathways. The guest house, now uninhabited, sat in a perpetual hush, its curtains drawn, its porch light off. Talia hadn't returned. She was living with her sister in Topanga now, near the ocean. A modest cabin surrounded by pine. There, the air was clean and smelled like sea salt and eucalyptus. She hadn't spoken much to anyone about the house except once, when she told her sister that she sometimes woke in the middle of the night and smelled cigar smoke. The scent came from nowhere. It vanished as quickly as it arrived. But each time, it was accompanied by a strange echo in her ears, like someone laughing at her from far away. Jeremy, meanwhile, had gone deeper. A neighbor named Glenn first noticed it around the third week of April. He lived across the street and down a few houses. He was walking his dog around 11:30 p.m. when he saw the light glowing in the study window again, bright. Almost too bright for a desk lamp. And movement. Shadows crossing in front of the window. But when he paused to look, it was as if the house noticed him. The light snapped off. The curtain drawn. Glenn hurried home. He would later say the atmosphere around that house had shifted. It wasn't just haunted anymore. It felt occupied, like someone or something was hosting. By the time Talia received the letter, it was nearly May. No stamp, no postmark, just folded paper slipped under her front door. In her husband's handwriting, it read, "He likes the act now. He says I'm ready. You should come see. You won't believe the crowd we've got. Every night, packed house. I open with 3. He finishes the set. Tell Boomer I'm sorry. He never liked the hecklers. Yours, Jeremy." Talia threw up that night. She hadn't heard his voice in nearly 6 weeks, and seeing it in writing so casual, so proud, felt like being touched by something cold and irreversible. She drove to the house the next day, parked across the street, sat there for 20 minutes without moving. The lawn hadn't been mowed. A shutter was loose and clapping in the breeze, but the porch light was on. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she didn't go in. Instead, she called a man named Rafael Martinez. Rafael was a retired production designer who'd worked for decades on variety shows and comedy specials in the 70s and 80s. He'd designed lighting for Rickles. He knew the man's rhythms, the way his spotlight hit just so, the peculiar tension that filled a room right before Rickles walked on stage and decimated everyone in it. He wasn't a ghost hunter, but he knew performance. And he knew when a stage refused to shut down. Talia had found his name in an old article while searching through Rickles' History one sleepless night. She called him, told him everything. He didn't laugh. He said he'd be there on Friday. The final performance took place on May 3rd, a warm evening with a light haze over the city, casting the sunset in bruised gold and fading purple. Talia waited outside in the car, engine idling, as Raphael approached the front door. He wore a black suit, polished shoes, and carried nothing but a small, old-fashioned flashlight and a metronome. He stepped inside, and the door shut behind him. What happened inside that house has no official record. Raphael was never seen again. Not by police. Not by neighbors. Not by Talia, who waited in the car until the porch light flicked off for the first time in months at exactly 1 a.m. What is known comes from what she found the next morning. The front door was unlocked. The house was silent. Inside the study, the desk was empty. No microphone. No notebook. The chair was gone. But the walls had changed. Lined in crimson drapes from corner to corner, the room had become a perfect miniature of a Vegas lounge. Velvet covered. Stage lights fixed in the ceiling, turned off now. A semicircle of chairs, 8 of them set out facing the desk. And on each chair, a photograph. Black and white. Each photo showed a different man in a tuxedo. Some with cigars. Some grinning. All seated. All watching. The last photo at the far end was of Raphael. Framed. Labeled with a brass plate. Critic. Jeremy was never found. The house was sealed by the city later that month. Code violations. Abandonment. The land has since been sold to a development company out of state. But no one touches the building. The main structure still stands. Weeds overrun the pool. Mail piles up. And if you walk by late enough, when the wind is still and the city noise has died down, you might hear it. The soft crackle of a microphone. The rise of canned laughter. The faint clink of a glass being raised. And then, a voice. Half smiling. Acidic. Impossibly familiar. You've been a great crowd, but the real show's just beginning.